Well, good morning. This is Plant Smart Living with Farmer Fred. Really glad you could join me today out here in the vegetable garden. It's a beautiful day here in the first week of July. It's kind of humid today. We're expecting maybe some thunderstorms in the afternoon, but you know, with all this heat we've been having, the garden certainly is flourishing. The tomatoes are taking off. The peppers are finally starting to get their feet in the ground, and they're starting to take off. In fact, they've been producing peppers now for a couple weeks, but it was a slow start here in Pennsylvania. We had a lot of rain and some cool weather, so with this heat, you know, the melons are starting to take off. Well, today I wanted to go harvest some of my Swiss chard Fordhook Giant. It's just a beautiful leafy green. So thanks for joining me today out here in the vegetable garden. The one reason I start my introduction walking through my trellis is so that you, the viewer, can watch my garden develop and mature and evolve over time. It was back in the beginning of April when I started my first garden video, and so the video with the garden at that time had just come out of hibernation. It was a blank slate. It was a blank canvas, you could say. And I look at my garden as a piece of artwork where the soil's the canvas and the flowers, the vegetables are kind of like a painting. And so you can get to watch it open up and blossom like a flower from the spring to the summer and to the fall. And so, like behind me here, I have my clematis vine growing up. You're able to watch that develop and blossom. I have a hanging plant here my wife put here. She likes all the different plants and flowers in the garden. I have my canna lilies here in a corner. They just recently opened up in the last week or so. So I just think it's really nice to be able to watch the garden grow and mature over time. Well, growing this leafy greens in the garden is something really easy to grow. I planted these in my composted leaf mulch that I amended with topsoil, and I direct sowed these in the garden back in like April. You just dig like a half-inch furrow of soil, and then you plant your seeds in there, and when you go to direct sow your seeds in the soil, you want to make sure that you keep them moist during the germination period. And then once they grow up out of the soil a couple inches, then you can thin them out anywhere from 6 to 12 inches apart. But leafy greens is something really easy to grow. They require anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, and so they're just definitely power packed with nutrition. And you can even eat the stalk. It's similar to celery. So anyhow, why don't we go over there and harvest some of this beautiful Swiss chard. So this is where I have my Swiss chard Fordhook Giant growing. I've also grown the variety Bright Lights in the garden, but this just has become my favorite. They really grow nice and large. I guess that's why they call them Fordhook Giant. And so what I have is I planted 2 8-foot rows, and then I space the seeds about 2 inches apart, and then I thinned them out to about 12 inches apart. And so I have 8 plants in the front row and 8 plants in the back row. And they seem to supply my wife and I with plenty of greens. I also share them with my 3 daughters and friends, and so we got plenty of greens here. And also, along with the kale that I grow, I have an really enough greens to feed a small army. But when you go to harvest your Swiss chard, you want to make sure you just harvest from the outer leaves. Don't pick that central leaf that's growing in the center, otherwise the plant will stop its growth. And so you always just want to make sure you harvest from the outside, and you can just basically, it snaps off right at the base of the plant. And so why don't we take a closer look at these beautiful and healthy and nutritious chard leaves. You also want to make sure that you go through your plants and maybe harvest out any dead leaves, or sometimes there's some leaves on the inside that don't get enough sunlight, and so I go through once in a while and just pull out any of the dead leaves. I also water these nice and deep, maybe once a week, about an inch of water or more, depends. If it hasn't rained, you certainly want to give it at least one deep watering. That way it trains the roots to go nice and deep into the soil. Now, depending on the temperatures, like we've had a really hot week this week so far, I may water these twice during the week. Another reason I love this Swiss chard is because it's actually in the spinach family. You know, as most gardeners know, spinach bolts when the summer heat comes, and so this Swiss chard goes right through until we get our first heavy frost, and it's very similar to spinach. In fact, my wife and I, we use this Swiss chard, and we use some of our kale in my big salads that I have every night. And so it's a great lettuce substitute, a spinach substitute. And again, it's so easy to grow, and you can also grow these in containers on your back patio or deck, and so it works really well. So why don't we harvest some of these leaves? I always encourage people to take the larger outer leaves first, so it allows sunlight to get to the plants in the back. Again, keeping in mind you want to always harvest the outer leaves and the larger leaves first. And so like I can harvest some in the front here to allow some sunlight to the ones in the back. Like here's a leaf that's got a few holes in it that's pretty bad. I'm going to end up putting that in the compost pile. We also steam our leaves here too. It's another great way. You can steam them with garlic and onions. It makes a really delicious dish. But you do want to try to make sure you break off the stalk right at the base of the plant. I think another leaf should do it for my wife and I here. I also amend my leaf compost with alfalfa pellets. I end up buying it from a local store. It's called Harleysville Feed. I buy a 50-pound bag. It costs me around $20, maybe a little bit less. But it's a great slow-release fertilizer for your garden. Feeds the soil microbes. It adds nice organic matter to the soil. Probably a month before the season starts, I'll go through and just sprinkle a nice layer in the garden. You could even rake it in your soil some, and you know, maybe once a month you could sprinkle it around your plants. It's a slow release fertilizer, so it's not going to burn your plants. You could also maybe put 3 cups of the pellets in a 5-gallon bucket, fill it with water, and maybe let it sit a day, and you could also make a highly nutritious compost tea to feed your plants. If you make a compost tea out of the alfalfa pellets, the plants will take it up quicker because it's a liquid fertilizer. Now the pack of seeds cost me under $2. I probably used not even half the pack, so you can supply yourself all summer long with maybe 50 cents or dollars worth of seeds, and you just get a real bang for your buck when you grow greens out in your garden. So let me encourage you to think about growing Swiss chard in your garden. It's just a win-win situation. Well, anyhow, if you have any comments or questions about this video, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And you can also visit us at PlantSmartLiving.com, and there you can learn more about gardening and also how you can reclaim your health by adopting a whole food, plant-based, vegan lifestyle. Well, anyhow, I hope you have a wonderful day and a bountiful garden season. So until next time, this is Plant Smart Living with Farmer Fred.